This is Andrian.
And this is Ray. Welcome to the Talk Laugh podcast.
Every 2 weeks, we'll invite a new guest and
In every session, we'll dig into their life, relationships, and perspectives.
one question at a time.
Let's talk laugh!
Yay. Welcome to the Talk Laugh podcast. And this week, we've invited Damian. So, what we gonna talk about, right? Today?
Oh, so this time I'm doing the introduction. But I think today we are very, very excited to have Damian Fry as our first Western guest. Not to be racist or anything. It's actually very inclusive. So basically, today with Damian, we're gonna, explore how he went from small town, a British guy, and his journey to, the whole bustle in Asia and that whole journey. Yeah, so Damian, you want to give a brief introduction of yourself first before we actually deep dive into different perspectives that you went through?
Cool. Okay, well, it's great to be here. I'm very excited by this. My name is Damian. I am originally from the UK, and I've been in Hong Kong for 7 years now. So time has flown by. But I'm originally from a small town outside of London called Stevenage. Maybe a population of like 90,000 people compared to the few million that are in London. And
so you basically know everyone in the town, right?
Basically, yeah, almost so. Yes, I live on the outskirts of that town in a small little part of the town. And essentially, I was living there for many years before I was ready to move to the big city of London and explore and branch out.
Very cool. Yeah, so I think why we invited you to the podcast, because like we sort of like, also by the way, give some context how we actually met Damian. So Damian and we are on Instagram buddies, so you can actually meet really genuine people and interesting people on Instagram. So basically we connected on Instagram on my fitness account. He's like a super micro influencer with 20, 30,000, 40,000 following. So it's a pleasure to have you on our podcast. But I think can you describe more about your journey from UK to Asia? What's the whole thought process? Because when we were having dinner off mic, right? And then in breakfast, just want to understand more about, how that whole thought process and how that whole opportunity came about.
Yeah, I mean, because it is a massive move, and to set it off, I moved here with no job. I was, ready to, I've worked in London for many years. After leaving the small town of Stevenage of 90,000 people, I was already ready to hit kind of the city and moving into London. And, I think every young person living in a small town wants to go to the city. That's your kind of dream. And obviously you travel into London a lot as a kid, and then eventually you're like, okay, I could work here and get a job here. So I moved to London, and then I worked in London for a number of years, and then I traveled a lot in Europe, traveled North America for work and stuff and for vacation. And then you kind of get this, I had this urge of like, okay, I need something else. I need to do something else. I need, you get to a certain age and you're like, okay, if I don't do this now, I'm not a spring chicken. I'm not in my 30s. I look like I am, but I'm not in my 30s. So you kind
very
of
well kept.
Very well preserved. So you kind of get to this point where, okay, you need to make a change, and this change has to happen now, or it's never going to happen. So I was working at Deloitte. I'd done a number of event jobs in the past. Worked for a number of different organizations, all in the corporate sector. And I traveled quite a bit around Europe for work, and North America, Latin America, etc. And just a little bit to Asia. I did quite a few events in Singapore, and kind of really liked Singapore, to be fair. So, and I had a few friends living in Singapore and a few friends living in Hong Kong who'd all kind of moved with their job at the time. And just one day I was kind of, just come back from a trip to Hong Kong to see friends. And I literally said to my boss, I think I want to move to Hong Kong. And she's like, but you've just started in this team. Because I'd literally just moved teams. I've been at Deloitte for like nearly 4 years. I'd moved into a new team. And she was a bit surprised, but also very supportive, as was my family as well. My mom, obviously was like, where's Hong Kong? Firstly, I was like, why do you want to move to Hong Kong? Again, you know, the kind of, not to be mean or anything, but the kind of small town, you're like, where's Hong Kong? Like, you can't speak the language. All these things go through people's heads, and went through my mind as well at the same time. So, I then quit my job 2014 and just came over. Kind of just packed my bags, quit my job, and just moved over. And, you know, it not until you get here and you get off the plane and you get to the airport and you're like, oh my God, what have I done? You know, you kind of get this feeling, right? And it's not a negative feeling. It's just kind of, is this going to work for me? Like, I barely know people here. I knew a few people, but not too many. And, you know, you kind of almost feel like you're alone a bit, because like your comfort blanket sort of thing is
you
gone.
start a blank page.
Yeah, exactly. You're starting a blank page and you're kind of like, okay, is this going to work for me? But, you know, I think you have to take risks at a certain point in your life. You have to take risks. And I think this is a huge risk, right? This is one of the, you know, the biggest risk I've ever taken. So I was, I kind of just sat in my room, I think at the time, and I was like, okay, let's make this work. And from that point, I was meeting people, I was meeting recruiters, I was just going out there, right? I was going through my LinkedIn, I was just meeting loads of people. And you get feedback of varying levels, right? Some saying, you don't speak Cantonese. I'm like, oh, okay, great. You know, you don't have Asia experience, or all these things. But what you do have on your side, maybe you're lucky, is that I'm British. This is an old British colony.
Yeah.
There are a lot of British people working and living here. There's a lot of expats living here, and this is a very expat-friendly city.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
And these are things that you kind of think, okay, these are on your side. There's a lot of negatives, but there's also a lot of positives. And it took me about a month, and a recruiter said to me, we have a job. I was like, okay, let's take it. Right? It was working for an agency, something I'd never done before.
Congrats on that.
Thank you. I know, like, I felt quite lucky, the fact that within a month of being here, like the June, July, I got a job in an agency. They were very desperate to bring someone in immediately. And obviously I didn't have a job, so I could start almost immediately after waiting for my visa, obviously. And then it just kind of stoneballed from there. Like you start this job, you have to find your way immediately and make it work.
Yeah. But agency for what?
So I work in event management, marketing and events. So my background has always been in events and marketing in some respect. And this is events ranging from all sizes, you know, from small, intimate, bespoke events to large scale conferences, etc. So at Deloitte, I was doing a lot of conferences, a lot of events for high net worth individuals, you know, private gallery viewings, plus drinks, plus, you know, networking, etc. So this agency that I started at is an international agency with a office here in Hong Kong at the time, and they specialized in medical events.
Okay.
So a lot of, and I had done medical events in the UK, and they were looking for someone to come in and basically manage the team. Their director had left. They had no one. They were all running around like headless chicken, and they needed someone immediately just to come in and just come in as a conference director and start managing the team and managing these conferences that were literally about to take place, right? These huge kind of medical seminars that you see take place at the convention center.
Yeah.
Nothing had been done. Everything was a mess. My team was a mess. I was like, okay, here comes my first challenge.
Yeah.
Right? Well, another challenge.
Yeah.
I've already moved to Hong Kong. That was a challenge. And now another challenge was about to unfold.
Yeah.
Right? And when you're coming into a company that's in a bit of a mess, and your team is a mess, and one by one they are leaving, your client is, I'd have to say, the worst clients I've ever worked with in my life, because they were really aggressive. But it's something you have to just find yourself and be like, okay, let's do this.
Yeah.
Make it work. Yeah. Because you know, you can't fail, because that's
your first role in Hong
Kong. Yes, my first role, exactly. It's my reputation.
Yeah.
And you have this added pressure being here as an expat. You're on a visa. Anytime they could revoke your visa and be like, okay, bye-bye. Right? And that has always been in the back of my mind, like forever. Like since the day I arrived here, I'm on a visa and you could be kind of told to leave at any time. right? So, but yeah, I mean, I was there for a year. They made me redundant because it was just closing down. But I had some crazy experiences because my clients were insane, like lawyers and doctors, etc. Right? Really high-pressured individuals who put a lot of pressure on their conference, understandably, and a lot went wrong because there are certain things I didn't know or had to just guess. And I think a big thing about events is you have to rely on a lot of people, right? It's not just you. You're like it's an orchestra basically. You're conducting, but there are many people involved, and invariably something will go wrong.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how well planned you are, something will go wrong.
It's just how you manage the unexpected.
Exactly.
That is the most important.
Correct.
For events.
Exactly.
But how do you move on from like events to your next role? Like what was the transition? Like,
so I mean, so I've always still been in events, so it's still events where I am now. So I think over time I think the good thing about Hong Kong again is word of mouth and your reputation, right? So it's about building that reputation. So I left this agency after being made redundant and kind of thinking to myself, crap, what next, right? I still need my visa, so I need another job. And luckily, through the networking that I'd done previously, I went to UBS at the time and said to them, you know, because they had a job, she was like, okay, you might not be the right fit, but my friend is about to go on maternity leave. She works at another bank. Do you want to go there and have a word with her? And I did. I just sent her an email. She's like, yeah, come in. Went through maybe 3 or 4 rounds of interview and got the job. And she's the VP head of events. So I was like, okay, I'll take her maternity contract. So I kind of jumped into that role, left that after 7 months after maternity. And then another person had the similar role, also maternity. So I jumped into her role. I was like, okay, I'm just going to be doing maternity forever now.
You have found your niche.
I found my niche, yeah, exactly. So I need to look on LinkedIn. Any more pregnant women? And just take their job, basically, for the short term. But again, I think, this kind of helps to make you more resilient because you're jumping in and out of a role that you immediately have to
perform and deliver.
Correct. Immediately, because things are already happening and you know, you need to just jump into it and keep it moving. So I think, again, for me, this is, you know, and I think that from my whole journey here in Hong Kong, these are the experiences that I've really kind of, you know, grabbed. That this city throws you into the deep end a lot and you have to just roll with it, right? Yeah. There's nothing else you can do. You have to just roll with it and embrace it and the challenges of whatever that happens along the way, right? So so I did those maternity roles. That came to an end, and then there was a few months I had nothing, and I was like, okay, what do I do now? And I had applied to this other agency a few times, and I knew the general manager there. They didn't have anything at the time, but as soon as I finished the maternity, they had a job because somebody left. Yeah. So I was really lucky. So I was kind of, again, it's the right time, right place. And I feel like that, again, has been kind of part of my journey as well. It's the right time, right place. So in the end, she'd left. They were like, okay, we need an event director to come in, again, to manage a small team and to take over some of these large events. So it was back to an agency, something I'd done previously. So kind of understood, like, from a client perspective. I've been the client, and now I'm working with clients. So you see it from the other side. Yeah. So, so I think it's just a lot of jumping, stop, start. But it's ultimately got to where I am now, working through the agencies and then going back into corporate, which is where I am now in blockchain. Yeah, something completely different.
So I think very, very interesting journey, and thanks for sharing that, Damian. I think where we wanted to also dig into, because in this episode we also want to focus more on to those young adults out there that most of our listeners are in Asia. So they probably have the mindset that they want to work abroad, outside. Right. So from your standpoint, what were some of the you've shared your whole thought process, how you landed it, but what were some of the challenges? Because, you know, Asian parents are more protective. So do you have any challenges from a family support standpoint? Your managers were very supportive, so that's great. So can you share a bit more on from that standpoint? Did you have any barriers, or how did you manage expectations from your parents' side before moving to a completely new tiny dot in Hong Kong, right?
Right. I would say maybe because of my age at the time, I was already in my 30s, right? So I think that is a benefit to me.
Okay.
I'm not a young honky coming out of university or something who wants to find themselves and find and move overseas. I think moving overseas is the best thing you can ever do, and I would totally encourage that. But I think I was at the right age to be able to say, okay, this is something I want to do. You know, my employers are comfortable and encouraging. My parents, my mum is very encouraging, and my family. I think, obviously she doesn't travel so much, so she's not aware of different cultures, different cities, etc. But other members of my family are, and they've traveled a lot. My granddad was in the war, so he traveled a lot. So I think on the whole, very encouraging, and no barriers, I would say, actually, because again, like I said, because of my age, etc. I think it was just easier for me. But I think for any young person, maybe in Hong Kong, there is an urge, I understand, to go maybe to the UK. I understand that totally, to get a different perspective, to understand the market. And I think that's really important, to understand the market and the culture. Because me coming over as a Brit, you think, okay, it's going to be easy, right? Yeah. But it's not. Of course it's not. And it doesn't matter, even if it's not Hong Kong, could be any city in Asia, or even the world, right? I went to Miami. It's not easy in Miami, I promise you. People work very slow. And I'm not being rude, I'm just saying they work very slow. When in events, it's all go, 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 go. And I need it now, and I'll get it in an hour, right? So it's little things like that you have to adapt, and you understand how to adapt and things, right?
Yeah. But what made you decide? Just now we were talking about you went to Singapore, you went to Hong Kong. What made you to decide to come to Asia or Hong Kong in particular? Well, what are your decision factors? Yeah,
I think there were a number. I mean, I already had friends here for a start in Hong Kong, right? So a good friend of mine worked in London. He came over with Coach to Hong Kong and worked for them for many years, now live in New York. So he's traveled around a lot. And other friends of mine have, you kind of build up this network of expats who've kind of all been in the same position. A lot of them obviously came over with jobs. I don't know anyone that came over with no job. So that's quite unique, I guess. But I think for me, it's just hearing their story and understanding where, how they've been able to make Hong Kong their home and how comfortable Hong Kong can be as home. Hong Kong, I would say, is not too dissimilar to London in terms of being comfortable here, right? And I think that's an important part of it. Like, if you feel comfortable and safe, then you can make anywhere your home, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Whereas London is comfortable, but it's not safe, right? I mean, you have to be honest. Like, I've been through a lot in London, working there over the years with numerous amounts of issues that London has had. And I think London does make you a stronger person for sure, because you have to go through so much living in a city like that, because it's very different. Hong Kong is, I'd say, quite similar. Wherever you are in Hong Kong, it's quite similar. But in London, you could be in different pockets of London because it's so big, and you could be anywhere, and you might not want to be there.
What kind of issues? I don't even know what kind of issues would you run into in London.
In London?
I think I can relate to that because I'm actually from Malaysia, and Malaysia is not really the safest place either. But it's not as crazy as Brazil and other places.
Sure.
But I think in cities like Singapore, in Hong Kong, safety is, I think some people actually do take the safety for granted.
Correct.
Because for different places, there's snatch thieves or people coming up with you with knives. I'm not sure. So maybe you can share more perspective in the UK.
100%. I mean, just a case in point would be, I used to work. So I used to travel in from Stevenage to King's Cross, the main station, one of the main stations in North of London, to then go to my office, which was just behind Oxford Street. So I just got off the train, got to my office, and then someone blew up the train, right? The underground was blown up. So that was just like hours after getting into the office. Oh, wow. And then everyone's like freaking out in the office, right? Because my other colleague also lives in a small town near me. So you kind of just, these things that happen, a bus blew up, or someone got stabbed, or someone got shot. There's so much can happen in a big city, and it happens in many big cities, major cities, So I just think big things like that have an impact on you. that can really shape kind of your mind, and you become a little bit resilient to it as well. You know, I went to South Africa and some kid was chasing me with a knife, right? It's just crazy. Like all these things that kind of just happen to you, and you kind of like, what if you move to Hong Kong, these things don't happen because it's so safe here. It really is super safe here. And yeah, you take that for granted that it's super safe here, that these things don't happen. And when something does happen in the news, like the police officer recently, that's major news because that's so rare here. But in London, that's so regular and common, right? Which is a horrible thing to think and say, but it is. That's the reality of a major city like London. So I think, there's many factors that make Hong Kong for me home, but at the same time, for someone wanting to leave the city and exploring and getting that experience, that real world experience with the comfort blanket of your parents or whatever, then you have to do it. Because it makes you a more rounded person for sure.
Moving somewhere else.
I completely agree. But maybe I'm a bit too young to say, but I mean, the reason why I actually decided to study university abroad is so that I can get I could station in a place away from home for a bit.
Right.
And back then I also had the same evaluation process, whether Singapore, whether it's Hong Kong. I actually considered the UK, but I chose Hong Kong because I just thought it was an easier place to land a job. And that served me well. And now I've been working about 4 years already in Hong Kong, and really to get that global perspective.
Exactly.
But
which is important.
It's a bit funny because I never had that perspective in Malaysia as a full-time worker. So eventually, but I think I'm enjoying the moment in Hong Kong. It's not to say the easiest place to live, but with friends, it definitely makes things easier. And you know, 100%. If your partner is also here, you start to build your own network, and then it slowly becomes home. And Hong Kong is a great place to accumulate wealth, right?
Exactly. And I do think, to your point about friends, etc., in London, you have to travel so far to meet someone, right? London is huge. Getting around takes at least an hour from door to door, right? Whereas in Hong Kong, it's like 7-10 minutes, right?
Maximum is like half an hour.
Correct.
And that's like from one point of Hong Kong to the other side.
Exactly. Like if you wanted to meet your friends for coffee, you can do it real quick. In London, you need to decide where to meet, what time, who's going to come from where. There's so many factors. And I think, Hong Kong, if you want to meet people, it's also very open to that as well. London may be a little bit more closed in terms of meeting people. So totally.
So what's your mindset? Do you when you move a place, move location, you definitely want to have a certain amount of money so that you can move or have a game plan?
Was that part of your consideration? Just to understand, so that for the young people that are listening,
or considering to move.
Exactly. What were you in that current state? Did you really have a game plan? But it sounded like you knew people and then you kind of just went with it.
I think it's more of that. I to be fair, I had no money. To be fair, I was living in this tiny little flat, like sharing a room with many other people, a house with many other people. Actually, this married couple with their 2 kids.
This was in Hong Kong, right?
This is in London.
Oh, London.
Just before I moved here. And I didn't have any savings really. I was like, I think I said to my friend that I need to move in with you because I have no money to pay for an apartment. Because I looked online and obviously apartments are very expensive here. So I was kind of like, if I move over, I'm not sure how I'm going to live here. Like actually financially live here, because you have maybe a small amount that I'd saved over time from working in Deloitte and then quitting the job. But then you're paying for your flights, you're paying for a lot of things you need to upfront. And then you think to yourself, okay, maybe I could live for about a month or 2 without a job. Which when you get here, you realize maybe that's less because I'm running out of money fast, because this is an expensive city after all, right? So I think, that would be something I would definitely strongly recommend, is having some money behind you, because you never know what's going to happen, right? So I think having that, just working out how long you think you could
without a job,
without
right?
a job, 3 to 6 months or whatever. Have that as your kind of your backup, because trust, like I probably should have had something, but c'est la vie.
So touching on that point, just to wrap up on the most important part, so for those young listeners out there, young adults that are currently working comfortable jobs or jobs that are not that comfortable and looking and are hungry for a change in a different industry or a different country,
right?
What are some of the key advice that you would give them?
I think the first one is to is to plan, kind of understand what you want to get out of moving overseas. I mean, you know, language is a big thing. You know, you could move to any part of Europe, but if you don't speak French or German or something, then it's going to be difficult, right? So I think it's understanding, you know, the barriers like language and things like that could be quite difficult. And just understanding, you know, I think it's about having that right mindset. Like, you want to go over to another city to embrace it, to enjoy the culture, to really immerse yourself into a city, but also to challenge yourself and really kind of open doors. You have to be really confident in opening doors. I think moving to Hong Kong has made me a lot more confident, for sure. I was already pretty confident in London, but I think coming over to a new city, you've got to be. It does really test you. So having that confidence, I think, is a big thing. But just opening those doors and having the courage and just really, just go in with the mindset that this is about learning, developing, and just embrace everything, the good and the bad, right? Because the bad will make you stronger. The good, you just roll with it, right? But I think understanding that it's not going to be a picnic, it's not going to be perfect, but I think it's something that you should do. You should really open your mind to and just go with it.
Yeah, I really like the point that, you know, really understanding what you want to get out from in that specific place or that industry. I think that's important, because a lot of people, actually anything that you do, you always assume that the grass is always greener on the other side.
100%.
And if you're not clear on what exactly you want to do, you might not even be sure like that your current role would actually give you that. You're just not being
exactly, and whether that role translates into another city. You know, I've moved from one job to another that was very similar in London. I went from a business school to another business school, and it was very similar, but I hated every minute of it, from the people, from the culture, from everything. So I think it goes back to kind of, you know, challenging yourself, but really kind of getting the most out of it and understanding that it's a journey and you should embrace this journey and just roll with it.
All in all, I think is to keep a positive mindset.
Exactly.
Is to roll with it. Is to just go with the flow. Because sometimes I think during our brunch we talked about you cannot plan too much ahead anyways.
Exactly.
There's so
100%,
even if you have like 10,000 contingency, there's something that will go wrong.
Correct.
Just know how to embrace it and take care of it.
Yeah, and that's life in general, right? At the end of the day, life in general. Life is not easy. We all know that. So I think, why complicate it with, you know, other things where if you can kind of get the most out of something, but really kind of just roll with it, embrace it, good and bad, then I think, you know, even if it's for 1 month, 6 months to a year or more, you've had that experience, right? And you've got something that no one else has, right? Because every experience is different. So you're going to get your own unique experience, and that's something that money can't buy. You have to embrace that.
Yep. Agree. Completely agree. Yeah. And just to touch on the point, having a rough plan, I think that helps, but you shouldn't really get stuck to it and really be open, adapt to changes. Exactly. And with that confidence, and what I picked out, like, you're really, really resourceful, Damian. So with your connections, etc., in a new place, really be open to seek help from others.
Exactly.
And then in return, because in general, people are quite nice, right? That's how we connect on Instagram, and then, you know, we're doing the podcast, etc. So if you have an open mind, you have a good mindset and a rough plan, people will help you out along the way.
100%.
It might not be smooth, but with the right mindset, with the right adaptable mindset,
I could not agree more. I think having the right people around you, and you meet people along the way, maybe good, maybe bad, but along the way, again, it shapes you, it shapes your experience, and you milk it for as much as you can, right?
And I think just to wrap this first part of the episode on, you know, multiculturalism and also, you know, going through a new journey in a random place, right? Like, what are some of, you know, the things that you like or dislike? Maybe we can focus more on the dislike, because there's so many things to like about Hong Kong, right? All the guailos, all the foreigners, like, cheap alcohol, low tax. But let's focus on
all of that.
Focus on, you know, what made you really, you know, uncomfortable. What are some things that you don't like about Hong Kong? And then I think we can wrap it up and focus on.
Sure. Good question. I think for me, I guess you have to embrace that. I mean, Hong Kong is older Hong Kong people
Yeah.
are very set in their ways
Yeah.
and very. I mean, obviously, English is, aside from maybe not them not speaking English, so you kind of always communicate with people. So that can be maybe more of a frustration at times, I guess, but something you have to just work through. I do find people, like coming from London where it's very fast paced. People do say that Hong Kong is very fast paced. I would say it isn't that fast paced in some respects at times. Like if I'm walking through the street, people are walking quite slow. But I was saying earlier, when you get into a lift, they're the first person to press the close button when there's still people coming towards the lift. You're not the lift guard, so you shouldn't be closing the door. So just little things like that. I come to my office and the door is shut immediately and I'm still halfway in the door. Just little things like that. Like, people glued to their phones. I think only in Hong Kong do you hear the message, don't look at your mobile phone when you're on the escalator, right? Yeah. You don't hear that in London. They'd be more like, you might lose it. It'll be stolen. No, I'm joking. But just little things that, you notice. Maybe they're not super frustrations or dislikes, but things you just notice, these kind of nuances that are a bit different to back home. But maybe my biggest dislike would be the taxis. The taxi drivers don't always know where they're going. Where in London, every taxi driver knows where they're going. I'm not comparing, I know.
I think Hong Kong taxi drivers know where they're going, but they see that you're Caucasian.
And they're like, I'm not going to go there.
And they're like, I don't know where I'm going.
Yeah, that's probably more like it, yeah.
Or they take you on the long route and then
exactly. Your bill's like triple what it would be if it was like a honky. But also, I guess in London, a taxi driver would take you everywhere. Whereas in Hong Kong, they'll only take you on the island. You have to get another taxi if you want to go to TST or if you want to go like to new
different
territories.
rules for different
exactly. And also you can't pay by credit card.
Yeah.
Right?
That's annoying.
Which is annoying and quite a big thing in a city that is very tech savvy, but not a taxi. Taxi is not tech savvy. So I think they're some of the things that I kind of like, that's a bit annoying.
I think we couldn't agree more. Like there are some things that about Hong Kong that even cause frustration to the locals, which hopefully someone or something can fix it soon.
Eventually,
maybe one day.
Maybe one day.
We just keep doing our podcast, get more people to talk the good and the bad of Hong Kong, and then eventually someone listens to it and then implements it. But I think it all goes to the point where people don't like change, right?
Yeah.
And then once you actually have a system with the taxis, right? Because
true.
like it's run by the unions, and it's very exclusive to get the license, and to implement credit cards, all that. It all relates to different things.
True. And some change is. It's never going to happen maybe in our lifetime. So you just have to embrace it and just move on with it.
I think Hong Kong is slowly moving. Now Uber has introduced Uber
true.
Taxi.
You have Uber,
so they couldn't overcharge people anymore, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's a big thing, getting your change back, right?
Yeah.
When you give them a $20 note and you only get like a few and I don't ever count my change. So I'm like, okay, I'm assuming he gave me the right change.
Yeah.
Should be. Okay. So I think with that, we can wrap up first episode.
Yeah.
So really, really appreciate your honest sharing, Damian. I think it's a journey for us, right? Since the beginning that he shared, a lot of key takeaways. Yeah. So thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
And stay tuned for second episode where we will actually cover more about, because Damian is not just about being a guaylo and then coming to Asia. That's more to him. So I think in episode 2 with Damian, we'll cover more about his work, events, marketing, and how he actually started his own swimwear business.
Yeah, very interesting. So stay tuned for episode 2. If you listen to our podcast, stay tuned and follow us on Instagram. And if you want to listen to more of our episode, we are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other platforms as well. And you can watch us on YouTube channel if I can edit it correctly.
He will edit it on time, All right. See you guys in episode 2. Take care. Peace out. Stay safe. Make it your mission to make someone else's day better. All right.
Bye.
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 Peace out.